For the most part, disturbing plot twists have often been best reserved for the horror genre, when one last rug pull acts as a final terrifying gut punch to the audience. But that of course doesn't mean period dramas, psychological thrillers, noir, crime classics, and sci-fi brain teasers can't surprise audiences with a truly uncomfortable rug pull that gets under our skin. And with that in mind, I'm Josh from What Culture Horror, and these are the 10 most disturbing plot twists in non-horror movies. Number 10, I was born for this, Nightmare Alley. Very few people actually saw Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley, but it was an excellent, opulent thriller that, as is the director's way, wasn't afraid to pull its punches. It tells the story of a guy named Stan, who's taken in by carnival owner Clem, where he quickly makes a name for himself as one of its key attractions. Thankfully, this is one of the good attractions and not what's known as a geek. This is one of Clem's most insidious creations, an animalistic man who eats live chickens in front of a baying audience and is treated worse than dirt by the carnival owner. Clem explains to Stan why someone would live in squalor like this just for the show. Essentially, he takes people who are down on their luck with nowhere else to go, usually alcoholics, and gives them a bed and a steady supply of liquor in return for being treated like an animal. To make sure they don't get any fancy ideas above their station, he also drugs the alcohol to keep them strung out and dependent on him. He says to them that the work is only temporary, but that's just a straight up lie. They'll work until they're dead. As you can imagine, this is an incredibly dark and incredibly gross thing, but unfortunately, it's also foreshadowing for Stan himself, who finds himself back at Clem's place after going off on his own, ruining his life, and becoming addicted to alcohol himself. In the film's final scene, Stan returns to Clem to ask for forgiveness and a job, and in return, Clem says that, you know what, you might just have the exact thing. Don't worry, it's only temporary, but Stan could work as one of his geeks. Offering Stan a drink, something that Stan knows is lined with drugs, you might expect the down-on-his-luck fella to reject the offer, knowing the fate that it leads to. Instead, though, he looks Clem in the eyes with a smile on his face and says, "Buddy, I was born for this." Number 9, I'm glad you figured it, Primal Fear. Now, legal drama starring Richard Gere doesn't exactly sound like the most gripping movie on offer, but make no mistake that Primal Fear is one of the most intriguing and darkly intelligent thrillers of the 90s. Gere starts as defense attorney Martin Vale, who loves to twist the system in order to get his clients off on ingenious technicalities. He's the Jimmy McGill of his day, essentially. And his latest client is accused murderer Aaron Stample, who's been arrested for killing an archbishop. Though the stuttering Aaron seems innocent at face value, Vale soon learns that he may be suffering from dissociative personality disorder after he transforms into a vicious sociopath called Roy. Armed with this new information, Vale is then able to get Aaron off by reason of insanity. But then comes the kicker, and that's because Vale then comes to notice some inconsistencies in his client's story, and Aaron coldly reveals that Roy is actually his real personality, and that Aaron is the one he just made up. With that, Vale leaves dejected, realizing that he's just saved a genuine psychopath from a lofty prison sentence. Number 8, The Beach, Repo Man. Repo Man is far from the best film on this list, but it does come complete with one of the best examples of the overdone "it was all a dream" twist that you're likely to find in a generic action thriller. In a futuristic society where advancements in medical technology has led to a rise in organ transplants for critically ill citizens, government agents Remy and Jake are tasked with taking said organs back from clients unable or unwilling to pay for them. It's a cruel and thankless job that both men seem to nonetheless enjoy. But after Remy has fitted himself with an artificial heart that he can't pay for, his loyalties change and he clashes with Jake as he tries to tear the system down. The end of the film sees Remy and fellow client Ruth destroying the system from the inside out with the help of a reformed Jake. And afterwards we get a glimpse of the trio enjoying themselves on a beach, apparently happy and content. In the end, though, it's actually revealed that all of this is just a dream, and that Remy was badly beaten by Jake earlier in the film, and that his victory over the Union was all just a lie. Now he's a motionless shell of the man that he once was, living a peaceful life with no idea that his mind is stuck in a simulation. Number 7, Are You Paying Attention? The Prestige. Christopher Nolan is no stranger to deceptive rug pulls, but after all of this time, The Prestige still features his most disturbing plot twist. This flick follows rival magicians Robert Angier and Alfred Borden, who continuously try to one-up each other with increasingly dangerous tricks and sabotages. In their feud, Borden creates a trick called the Transported Man, which sees him move instantly between two wardrobes on stage. Desperate to figure this trick out and one-up his competition, Angier finds himself aligned with Nikola Tesla and concocting a trick of his own making. Now, the first twist in this tale is pretty simple, at least at first, as Angier debuts his own transported man trick, and Borden finds his rival dropped below the stage and drowning to death. Then Borden is accused of murder by his rival's partner Cutter and is hanged. But at the very end of the film, the true rug pull is revealed. That Borden was able to do the trick by using his identical twin Fallon to make it look as though he was moving seamlessly between the wardrobes. Why it worked as a trick is that nobody, including the audience, had any idea that he had an identical twin at all. But somehow, it gets weirder, because Fallon appears and then kills the somehow still alive Angier. And whilst he dies, the audience then learns that Angier had been cloning himself using Tesla's machine, killing his clones every time he did the trick, and that Borden ultimately died for nothing. Yeah, it sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? But strangely enough, clones in this movie kind of really works as a twist. It's awesome. Number 6, The Wrong Coffin, Buried. The stellar, claustrophobic thriller Buried casts Ryan Reynolds in his most affecting role as a man who finds himself kidnapped and buried alive. And as you can imagine, this is pretty much everyone's worst nightmare, as we don't see the kidnapping or what happened to this character called Paul before he was taken. Throughout the film, armed only with a lighter, a slowly dying phone, and a handful of other tools, Paul tries to increase his chances of survival, and he manages to get in touch with State Department agent Dan Brenner, who mounts a daring rescue mission to rescue this guy. As he waits to be saved, though, Paul is tortured and threatened, and ultimately all seems lost until the film's final moments, where Dan suddenly calls him saying they've found him and are finally preparing to dig him out. Relieved, Paul gets a tearful call from his wife promising her that, don't worry, he'll be okay, only for then Dan to call back and reveal that actually, he's arrived at the wrong burial site. The film then ends with Paul suffocating to death buried by sand as it overtakes his coffin. Number 5, Forget It, Jake, it's Chinatown. Chinatown, and I've definitely said that way too many times in a row, is a film made up of plot twists. All of them are earned and more devastating than the last, and watching Jake Geddes battle the corruption and secrets around him makes it clear why Robert Towne's script is often cited as one of the greatest ever penned. Now, initially, Jake is hired by Evelyn Mulry to investigate her cheating husband, only for the husband to turn up dead and the Evelyn that hired him turn out to actually just be an imposter. From there, Jake is thrown headfirst into a dangerous conspiracy with the real Evelyn, who finds herself torn between Jake and the fear that she feels for her father. After suffering numerous setbacks, a nasty injury, and numerous threats on his life, though, Jake finally gets to the bottom of this mystery, which basically boils down to the fact that Evelyn's daughter is also her sister, a result of her father's assault on her when she was a teenager. And if that wasn't enough, Jake then plots for Evelyn and her daughter to escape Mr. Cross's clutches, only for Evelyn to be shot dead by the police and Catherine let back into her father/grandfather's care. Jake, meanwhile, is powerless to save either victim, leading his colleague to utter the famous words, "Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown." Number 4, The Perfect Manipulation, Gone Girl. At first, Gone Girl is something of a slow-burning mystery. Amy Dunn has gone missing, and her husband Nick finds himself at the center of a media frenzy, first seen as an innocent victim who's lost his wife, and then as the chief suspect in Amy's disappearance. But then, partway through the movie, Amy is revealed to be alive and well, having actually faked her own disappearance as revenge for Nick's infidelity. She's left behind just enough evidence to implicate Nick in a possible murder plot, but after her plan hits a snag, she hides out in the lake house of her former lover, Desi. As Nick uses his TV appearances to beg for Amy's return, Amy decides eventually to go back to him, and does so by killing her former lover and making it look like he kidnapped and assaulted her. When she returns to Nick, the world rejoices, but their marriage becomes bitter when Amy admits everything to Nick and shares the news that she's pregnant. Nick ultimately decides to stay with her despite her crimes for the sake of their child, and because she's kinda capable of anything. Number 3, We'll Be Listening, The Conversation. He'd kill us if he got the chance. Those are the words that haunt veteran surveillance expert Harry Cole throughout Francis Ford Coppola's paranoid thriller, The Conversation. Harry picked up these words from a man who was having an affair with the wife of his wealthy employer, a man who hired him to record the pair during one of their meetings. Armed with these words and haunted by a past assignment that led to an avoidable murder, Harry tries to keep the tapes hidden, but is eventually forced to give them up by his client's assistant. Now absolutely certain that the couple's time is numbered, he tracks them down and is forced to hear them being murdered by his vengeful client. Enraged, he faces to confront him, only to then learn that it's actually the client who's been killed, not his wife or her lover. Listening to the tapes again, it actually becomes clear that Harry misheard the words that have been torturing him, as the recording actually says he'd kill us if he had the chance, a slight change in inflection, as if they're actually rationalizing what they were about to do, saying, well, if he was in our position, he would do exactly this. He would kill us and take what we had. So with that context in mind, it's revealed that he was actually listening to a murder plot the entire time, not two people worried that they would get murdered by this guy. Worse still, he's then threatened by his client's assistant to stay out of the situation, who threatens him by saying, we'll be listening. Harry then tears up his apartment looking for a bug, but fails, and the film ends with his life ruined and his paranoia overflowing. Number 2, what's in the box? 7. David Fincher strikes again, this time offering up one of the most quotable and sinister movie twists ever filmed outside of the horror genre. Unless you're on What Culture Horror, in which we regularly class Seven as a horror movie, but look, the best thing about this is that you can kind of put it in both categories. If you want to, you can class it as a horror, but some people don't, so I'm still putting it in here. Now, as you probably know, Seven is a gripping psychological thriller that follows Detective Mills and Somerset as they attempt to hunt down a serial killer whose murders are linked to the 7 deadly sins. Throughout their investigation, the pair become increasingly frustrated with the case, until the killer, John Doe, randomly turns himself in at the last second, leading them to a remote area where he claims he's placed his final victims. Doe taunts his captors, and the menace around what's actually going on builds to Goliathan heights. In the end, Somerset intercepts a box that contains the head of Mills's wife, and realizes that Doe wants Mills to kill him, and in doing so represent the final sin, wrath. And of course, Mills shoots Doe dead after begging Somerset to famously tell him what's in the box, as the film ends with Mills being driven away as Somerset laments about the poor state of the world. And look, I'm sorry about that impression. Nobody does, what's in the box? Normally, I'm sorry, nobody sounds good doing that. Prove me wrong. Number 1, revenge plot, Oldboy. The original South Korean psychological thriller Oldboy, please ignore the 2013 remake, contains one of the most unforgettable and genuinely jaw-dropping plot twists ever filmed. At the center of the story is Oh Dae-soo, a man imprisoned in a hotel room for 15 years, unaware of where he is, who's taken him, or what they even want. All he knows is that he's trapped and that he's the lead suspect in the recent murder of his wife. After he finally reaches freedom, Dae-soo tries to find his daughter and ultimately falls in love with a young chef called Mido along the way. And eventually, Dae-soo just gives up looking for his daughter and comes face to face with his captor instead, Lee Woo-jin, whose sister killed herself years earlier after Dae-soo found out that she and Woo-jin were actually incestuously involved. Woo-jin then reveals the final act of his revenge. See, Mido is actually Dae-soo's estranged daughter, and Woo-jin orchestrated their meeting as the ultimate form of revenge. He then kills himself while Dae-soo slips into despair, broken and defeated. Yeah, I don't think anyone saw this coming. So, that's our list. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. What did you think about these plot twists? And are there any other disturbing ones from non-horror movies here? Let me know, and also let me know if I'm cheeky enough for you to let us get away with keeping 7 on this list. But while you're down there as well, could you also please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Check out What Culture Horror. There's some excellent videos on there, and we'll be back soon with a new one very, very soon. Goodbye.